And we are now also live on YouTube on the Alaska Outdoor Alliance YouTube channel. That's kind of cool. It's my first experiment with that. So more people can tune in if they couldn't join the Zoom. Recording. And I will get started with our script, which allows me some time to for other people to get there, and we can get going. So. Okay. So good afternoon and welcome to another installment of the Alaska Outdoor Alliance's Lunch and Learn series. Alaska Outdoor Alliance provides the big tent under which stakeholders in our state's $3.2 billion outdoor recreation sector come together to share viewpoints, solve problems, and advocate with local, state, and congressional leaders for measures and funding. Is that echoing, you guys?
You're good.
Okay. Okay. We welcome all with a vested interest in the future of Alaska's outdoors to get on board, learn more, get news, and get involved at the alaskaoutdooralliance.org. Today's session will be recorded, and links to the greatest hits highlights reel from all our lunch and learn sessions will be shared in upcoming AOA news blasts. If you haven't already, be sure to sign up for the newsletter at the AOA website and invite your coworkers and friends to visit alaskaoutdooralliance.org to help grow the base of Alaskans who see a future for the last frontier that recognizes the health benefits of a thriving, sustainable outdoor recreation sector. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's host, Luc Mehl. Growing up in McGrath instilled a lifelong love for adventure and respect for remote places. I'm addicted to his blog, Things to Look At, and count on him to give me the best advice on anything from pack crafts to backcountry route planning. And with that, take it away, Luc.
Hey, thanks, Lee. Gosh, I kind of have to admit I'm a little bit nervous because there are way more people here than I expected, which is awesome, but also kind of intimidating. My intention is to not speak very much. The goal with this, when Lee asked if I would host a session, I basically expressed my interest in hearing Native voices on kind of my passions as an outdoor enthusiast here in Alaska. And so the panel is supposed to kind of emphasize the Native voice and let me and my peers listen in to this conversation. I do want to give just a very short background about why this is important to me. Growing up in McGrath, and I see my stepdad Francis is on here, which is fun. McGrath is about half Native, and that's mostly Athabascan. And so I grew up just exposed to that culture that was normal, and I missed that exposure living in Anchorage. I'm getting a pretty bad echo, so maybe somebody can mute there.
That's probably me.
Yep, that's better, thanks. So now I whenever I have an opportunity to travel through a village, I take it, and so that's often on skis or on a bike or in a pack raft. And sometimes those interactions are uncomfortable, and I'm just not sure if I'm welcome, and other times they're really comfortable, and it ends up being like the highlight of the entire trip is a really positive interaction with somebody at the tribal office or So this is a space I'm just very interested in, like where my passion for the environment, for Alaska and Alaska's people, how that those relationships work with Native Alaskans, and because I'm on Native Alaskan lands and traveling through Native Alaskan communities. So I think the format that I want to use today is I spoke with everybody in this panel, except for Irving, ahead of time, and kind of came up with their ideas of what they thought would be most interesting to present. And so I'm just going to target a question to each panel member, and then they'll introduce themselves and address the subject, and maybe the rest of the panel will have comments throughout their discussion. I've got 5-ish questions, and we've got about 50 minutes, so hopefully this will work out for about 10 minutes per question. And I want to start with Elizabeth Rexford. And Liz, there are a handful of people on the call here that some of them are very familiar with living in villages and growing up in villages. I see Sam Alexander on here, and some people are from out of state. And so I was hoping you could give kind of a brief, big picture, like what does recreation even mean in a village? And I thought that your background fits well to explain this, since you've kind of tried on a bunch of different roles, I guess, in different recreation communities. Does that make sense? Can't hear your audio right now. It worked when we did a test. I think maybe she's going to reconnect. That might have been sign language for reconnect.
Oh, there it is. Okay,
Gotcha.
I was allowed to unmute for a little bit. But hi, good afternoon. Thanks for the introduction, Luke. So the question that you asked, I actually wrote down some responses. I was a little nervous.
Well, don't forget your introduction too.
Oh yeah. Okay. Uvanga nadavarka tirat kiakading niluranga Fairbanks niluranga. Hi, my name is Elizabeth. My name is Nadavark, and I grew up in Barrow and in Fairbanks, and now I reside in Anchorage. And like Luke and a few others that I've seen on the call, I feel like there's probably a number of more people here on the call that have traveled out to rural areas and have participated in improving and increasing recreation activities for Native youth or Native communities. And recreation for Native communities, to me, are positive activities that help to keep community members healthy and grounded. And just from my experience participating in subsistence activities, and I grew up with my grandmother, my Aka, just hearing all of her stories, how recreation has changed from the pre-1940 era up until today. I think in her lifetime, she had seen the most change out of any other generation that I know of. So basically, before the 1940s, they were busy, with all the hunting stories that I've heard and all the hunting activities that I've participated in nowadays. It's a year-round preparation deal for, say, spring whaling, or it takes weeks for preparation post-work for fish camp on the Yukon River. And those are all outdoor activities, and it brings a community together throughout the year. And there's seasonal year activities all throughout the year that revolves around, say, spring whaling and distribution of food. And I feel like throughout the decades, it's changed a little, with snow machines and motorized boats and things like that. But I'd say that a lot of our Native communities are still very active in seasonal hunting activities. And also you see that in some of our sports that we still participate in nowadays. So like the Native Youth Olympics, it all originates from hunting activities and activities that help to improve agility, coordination, and things like that. So for overall what recreation means, I mean, today now basketball is huge. I grew up playing basketball and I love playing basketball. The tournaments are still huge today in our communities. And now I feel like there's so many different types of Native communities today. Our biggest village is now considered here in Anchorage. We have the majority of Native people here in the state now that reside in Anchorage. And I feel like the Native identity has changed over time, over my lifetime, even over the last 30 plus years, and what it means to be Native. Growing up Native in Alaska, from at least the stories in the 70s that I've read and heard about, is so different than what it means to be Native nowadays. Even today, even here in the biggest village in Alaska, is what I've heard a lot of people reference Anchorage as. And I've taught here in the schools as well, and the identities have changed. But overall, recreation Native communities, to me, a lot of it still revolves around the hunting seasons, hunting activities, and now today we have more modern sport activities, which I'm thankful for the other groups that I've been involved in that have brought in new equipment, new activities, exposed students to, and it's really opened up other doors and windows for kids and community members who have participated in new activities that have been brought up through skiing, mountain biking. When we moved to Fairbanks, I started gymnastics and other sports as well. But it's such an important topic right now for increasing activity, movement, and outdoor activities, especially in our time of the pandemic and COVID going on. So thank you, Luke. Thanks for hosting this.
Anybody else on the panel want to, anything stand out? Robin, I really liked what you said yesterday about something about like, maybe it felt weird if you went out and didn't come back with a bucket full of berries or something. Like you spend $8 on gas and don't have something to put in the freezer.
All right. I think we lost my image. Oh, here it is. Maybe.
We can hear you still.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, blueberries were my image, though. That was good. My favorite. Oh. No, I think of when it comes to recreation in a village, it's pretty rare that you can afford to go burn $10 per gallon of gas without the purpose of coming back with some berries, or maybe you're hunting while you're going. Everybody loves to see the country, but it's always nice to have a fish or something to justify the time you went away and spent that kind of money on running your boat. And most of the recreation is motorized these days. And I think the whole concept of people, they just, it's just so funny, because when I told an elder in my village that I was going to ski to Selwick, I got this big lecture about wolves and all kinds of other bad things that could happen to me. And people have just forgotten that traditionally people traveled under their own power. And the cool thing is that we've got all these people who arrive sometimes to remind people that, you could do this under your own power. I think that's a very cool thing about the whole business of outdoor recreation now.
I think this will segue well into what I'm hoping Shane will talk about, because when I looked through Shane's Facebook account, it was just like, he's biking, and then he's like, I'm getting into rafting, and I'm learning how to ski this year, and he's skiing. It's like, man, this guy is getting after it. And so, Shane, don't forget to introduce yourself, but I think we would like to hear from you about, like, I guess, like, do your friends think you're weird to have, to be so interested in these sports where you don't, I mean, I know you're also fishing and hunting, but, and also what is your motivation and what are the hurdles, both in Anchorage as an adult and for village kids? Like, what are the hurdles for opportunities to play outside? Does this make sense?
It does. Thank you for the question. I guess I'll just start with an introduction. As Luke said, my name is Shane McHale. I'm half Inupiaq and half Irish. My late grandfather is from Shishmaref. My late grandmother, Etataktu, is from Brevik Mission. My mom, Paula McHale, is from Nome. And my late father is from Pennsylvania. And I was born and raised here in Anchorage, graduated in the early 90s from West Anchorage High School. And have some experience in rural Alaska. Lived part of my childhood in Nome and frequently traveled to communities to recreate and also travel for work. But I like the question, do people think you're weird? Well, my late uncle used to think I was weird for recreating and camping without having subsistence as a priority. He always thought if you're gonna go out, you might as well bring back something home for the family. But we recreated differently. He was a very subsistence goal-minded individual. My late uncle Rick Toktu is the first one who motivated me to get outdoors. In the late 90s, he took me out hunting and fishing in the Cook Inlet, and we would take home seal, geese, and fish. And I remember bringing home these animals to my grandmother at Etataktu and seeing the smile on her face, and then feeling the connection to her heart that she was getting this valuable nutrition that she grew up enjoying as a child, enjoying in her late years. That was a really powerful connection that my grandmother and I had. A very fulfilling experience. Then I got into outdoor recreation through my late former best friend, James Akshatorek, who's no longer with us. He was an accomplished skier, to say the least. He was the #1 skier in the nation, coming from a small town, and in the nation in high school, coming from a small town of White Mountain. And in the 30s, I grew up playing basketball and wrestling in high school. And then in my 30s, started, kind of losing somewhat of an interest in basketball just because of my age and the physical demands of it. And then my friend James invited me to go out to do some cross-country skiing at Kincaid Park, which is a world-class ski trail system. We also have Hillside. And I had no idea these trails even existed. He introduced me to them. He lent me his skis. He taught me how to ski. What better teacher than someone who has so much passion for skiing? And that passion really, I really took that on, and I feel very blessed about it. And so started skiing, and I got into the Tour of Anchorage, which is an amateur ski race, the second largest amateur ski race in the nation. And I was pretty happy with that. And kind of moving forward, when I turned into my 40s, I decided I wanted to quit drinking alcohol. And I found it was a little harder than I thought. And so I turned to outdoor recreation for that healing, that mental and that physical healing, and that connection to the surrounding areas. And it brought a lot of healing to me. And I've been sober now for 3 years. And last year I did the Tour of Anchorage again. And I got a better time last year than I did when I first skied the tour, like I think 12 years ago. And then in the age group of 40 to 49 in the men's 25K, I came in 10th out of 25th, which I just couldn't believe. It was just absolutely a great personal achievement for me. So that's my big draw to outdoor recreation. Now, one of the questions was, what are some of the, Alaskan natives? I'm going to talk about people in my own age group here in Anchorage. When I talk about skiing or single tracking or biking, most of them grew up playing basketball like myself, and their big objection usually is that they don't have the experience, and that why invest $300 to $500 in a set of skis if they've never done before, if they don't know if they'll like it. And the ones that do take that initiative to give it a try, they absolutely love it, and they never turn back. They've always moved forward with skiing, and that's what they do. It's a sport that really you can fall in love with. And I guess kind of moving on to the next question is maybe looking at some of my friends who live in the rural communities. Their objections are, or their hurdles are far greater than here in Anchorage. There's not talking every village, but a lot of the ones that I know of and speak of, there's high unemployment rate, between 50 and 80% unemployment. There aren't any maintained trails. There are no programs. They have no skis or any assets like to bikes. And so people do walk along the road system. They usually one road that just goes to the airport, and that's about it. The money that they do have is spent on boating and ATVing. That's how people get their food and they travel. That's where the money goes to maintain those machines. And the children, they play basketball in school. And when they do get a bicycle, the environment is pretty harsh on their bikes, and they don't last as long as they do here in Anchorage. And so kids end up not having their bicycles very long, and then they end up recreating, doing what they've always done. And what's difficult is that there's not much else to do. And my friend even told me a story of this young kid whose parents allowed him to use a four-wheeler, and he ended up wrecking this past summer. And he, a very sad story. He had to come to Anchorage for facial reconstructive surgery. And it was very painful to hear that story. And I said, maybe, kind of, why was he on a four-wheeler? Because four-wheelers are meant for people that are 16 years and older. And she said, well, the parents wanted their children to have something to do. And so they granted access to their son who used it, who was underage, and, it was inappropriate for him to use it, but their parents were so hungry for giving them something. And that's a tragic accident happened. And I also asked about helmets, and they said, well, there's just not that much education when it comes to safety, when it comes to ATVing. And it's a really harsh reality when you really look at what outdoor recreation can be. I don't want to put like this doom and gloom on it, but there's this really strong need for more outdoor activity like skiing and biking and things. And the trail systems need to even be put in place. I asked her if the kids would, why they don't ski, because number one, they've never had the ski program in like New Halen. There are no groomed skiing trails, and they've just never been introduced to it. And I know that when I travel to the community, even just being a guest, these little kids are just so excited. I'll walk like during moose hunting season, I'll walk through the town to go to the store, and these little kids will be drawn and they'll ask who I am, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm here to visit this family here. I'm going to moose hunting. And they're just so intrigued by an outsider coming and showing interest in the community. We're just like a new, something totally new to them. And I could just see in their eyes, they're just so hungry to learn more about life and what life is like. And I know, when my friend purchased bikes for his nephews in the village, when he presented him the bikes, I could just see the smiling faces that the kids had. And this was something they'd never done before. And it really was this gift that just made them feel absolutely valued and gave them a sense of pride. So that's my perception and my experience with outdoor recreation here in Anchorage, and what I was been told by parents about what outdoor recreation is like in some of these villages.
Thank you, Shane.
Mm-hmm.
I think this will work well to next bring in Irving, because his experience in White Mountain is where there really is a mature opportunity for kids to get on skis. I want to mention briefly, I meant to say it earlier, that there's a chat option, on the bottom of this Zoom window, and feel free, everybody, to get in there and chat between yourselves. There are a bunch of Native experts that are participants that aren't on the panel that can probably answer some of your questions. I think as a group, we're not going to have time to take many or maybe any questions from the participants. So anyway, use the chat. And Irving, I'm hoping, so Irving's from White Mountain on the Seward Peninsula, and there's a program there, a mature ski program, and I'm hoping you can tell us about it. Basically, between that program and the Ski Coup effort that gets kids on skis across Alaska, there are like 8,000 kids in Alaska that know how to ski. And so I'm hoping to hear from Irving about, like, what do the kids get out of it? Do they ski as adults? Is there capacity in a community like White Mountain to try to lure in tourists to use those trails? The village support that? So just kind of general, anywhere you want to go within that space, but please introduce yourself and also kind of what's going on in White Mountain for folks that don't know.
Sorry, I couldn't give you a call beforehand.
I think with your audio, sorry, Irving. Irving, can you try?
My name is Irving Ashfelter from Mountain, Alaska. If you look at the Seward Peninsula.
Hold on a sec, Irving. We can't hear you.
Yes.
Can you try to turn off your video?
Can you hear me?
Not really, but maybe if you go without video, we'd be able to hear just your audio.
All right.
Oh,
Can you
yeah,
hear
we
me?
got you. Much better. Awesome. Oh, we lost you again. This is proof that Irving is actually in White Mountain on the Seward Peninsula.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, let's try that.
All right. So I was saying, Luke, I'm sorry I couldn't give you a call this morning to set up to get this going, but I'm busy at work. But like he said, I'm Irving Ashfelter from
I think the audio isn't going to work, but I believe there is a way to call in by phone. Lee, can you help figure out what number that would be?
Yeah, I'm working on that. Can you, would it be possible to go on to your next question while I get a phone number for Irving?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Okay, so Robin, I'm going to jump to you.
Okay.
And Robin is kind of my go-to for a lot of this. I really like every project, every interest that Robin has. And so big thanks to you, Robin, and to both Lars Flora and Martin Leonard who helped organize this, but are not on the panel. And basically, all of these projects that Robin does, including Ski Coup, seem to be intended to build relationships between villages and visitors. So, for example, with Skiku, rather than have like a set of like 15 excellent coaches, it intentionally draws from a pool of like 1,000 volunteers, and that's so that those volunteers get the experience of being in a village. And that seems very intentional from Robin. So I really liked how you, when we talked the other day, how you talked about visitation as like an opportunity to share. And I'm hoping that you can tell us about like, what do the visitors get out of these interactions? What do the villages get out of the interactions? But don't forget to give an introduction for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Robin Cornfield, and I come from Kayana, which is a village on the Kobuk River, and it's inland from Kotzebue, about 60 miles. And we are, you know, a lot of times you come to these villages and there's this family that, well, in our case, it's like 3 or 4 families, but these families who do all the little things you can do in a village that help you make a living. And in our family, we have, if you are somebody, and actually I see on the call a bunch of people who have been involved in various things, but one time I see Vicki Lytle is on the call, and she showed up having gone down the river in a inflatable raft and came to our store, which is the first thing you see when you come to the village. It's a big red building, and you know, the people who just come down the river came in and we talked about their trip, and I just have always loved having the chance to hear about where they came from and what they encountered along the way, and if they were going to keep going down the river, or if they were, you know, what they were doing. And I always wonder, you know, does everybody else in town, you know, are they all so intrigued about it? I'm not sure. You know, I worked for NANA for a long time, and one of the things that NANA did was go village to village and ask, you know, are you interested in visitors coming to town? And I think the interest has to do often with whether or not, you know, people have made the effort to introduce themselves, you know, to go to the city office or to talk to people along the way and to share where they've been. A couple of years ago, this amazing couple had started off by the border by Canada. I mean, can you imagine? I'm over on the Kobuk River in Western Alaska, and these people showed up in pack rafts, having walked all the way from the border of Canada, picked up pack rafts in Anchorage Pass, walked to the Ambler River, went down it in the boats. I mean, it's just amazing to me. And you know, when you're somebody from my village, when we started doing, and I've been running a ski program for a number of years, and when we started, and our own coaches said, well, we're gonna ski to Nordic, and we're gonna ski to Kayana after that, and back to Nordic and over to Selwyn. Honestly, my reaction was, you guys can't do that. You know, this is really something you can't do. You know, I was thinking, well, you're from the city, you have no idea where you are, you know, and yet our trails are really well marked. You can do that, and they proved it. And I think just that has opened the eyes of people that, you know, we can do something. We love snow machines, and we love four-wheelers, we love our boats, all of that kind of stuff. But to see the world, you know, under your own power is what the ski thing is all about. But also to meet people who are kayaking or canoeing or floating down the river and arriving, you know, that experience is something that most people in a village may have done by accident if their motor broke down, but, you know, it's not something they do on purpose most of the time. But what I've loved about our Skiku program, which involves volunteers who come and they stay for a week in a village, and they stay at the school, which is a different experience than if you were to, you know, really understand what goes on in a home. But, you know, you're at the school, you hang out with the kids for 10 hours a day, and all day long you get to talk, because some people don't move that fast on skis, but you get to learn everything about these kids and their families. You learn about the village infrastructure, you see the clinic and the couple of stores and the post office, and, you know, and you go to the city office and traditional council, you meet the parents. You know, it's just a deeper experience than when you show up at the beach and load up your stuff and quickly go to the airport and get on your plane and leave. You know, just taking that extra time is one of the, I think, the real opportunities that we've been able to offer urban people who now understand villages a little bit more than they would have ever had a chance to. Because often, you know, just because you come to a village doesn't mean you're really that welcome there, unless you take the time to share a little bit, I think. And then on the other side, you know, what do these kids get? You know, they get these incredibly enthusiastic people who are active, who love to be outdoors, who actually in some ways, I remember one of the first years when I went with Lars Flora, who is the other person who created the Ski Coop program. And I'm standing there while these kids come up to him and they say, Lars, where are we going to go today? I mean, it was as if they were seeing their village, their own village, for the first time. And you're exposing people because you go back to the backside of the runway where, you know, people don't usually go on skis in the winter. And that was really fun. And, you know, they're getting to know these people and talk to them. And there's a real sharing that happens. And these people from outside get to know people by name, and the people from the village have friends who continue to communicate with them in many cases after they've gone home. So it's a two-way street and a really great experience for both sides, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Do we have Irving? Maybe not yet. Well, then I'd like to go back to Elizabeth. And Liz, I know a bunch of the folks that are on the call are either have gone into a village and not really sure like if and how they should prepare. I see some guides as the participants, and I see some race organizers. Kathy Merchant is on here, who is or was organizing the ITI. And so I know that you, both informally and professionally, have worked to sort of train visitors to villages. And I'm hoping you can tell us like what's the idea? Why is this important? What are the key points? And also, I know I'm kind of loading a bunch of questions on you. People like I will come home and do a trip report and share pictures and share maybe even like a GPS track of where we went in the Brooks Range, something like that. And I know there's discussion between my group of friends, like how appropriate that is, like to share things about native lands. Like we don't know necessarily that something is a sacred mountain or region. So that's a lot of questions I'm throwing at you, but hoping you can just catch whatever feels relevant.
Off mute. Yeah. So I think Robin covered a lot in that question as well. And just it's so important on how you introduce a program and yourself to a community. You're working with people's kids. Well, when it comes to sports programming, but also just I think I started traveling to villages when I was about 14, my freshman year of high school. And back then I was really big into NYO and WEO. I used to hold a handful of records. So I was sent out to organize with the schools, the kids in the communities, and to hold larger events. And, you know, we would fill some of the community halls and host mini competitions. And so I feel like as I grew into my professional life, it just kind of became natural in how to introduce a group into community or a new idea, or maybe things that the communities have knowledge of, but expanding upon those. And I appreciated what Robin had mentioned and spending a whole week in a community. So when I came back from college, back to Alaska, I was based here in Anchorage and the North Slope. And I worked with a number of oil and gas not constituents, it's my current job, companies, and also with a coal company. And it's so important how you interact with these communities, because you're building relationships with the community, not just communities, but the families, the kids. And what I loved about the Ski Coup program is, well, when I first met them, I was in Barrow, and my nieces were so excited about skiing. And 10 years before then, I was in Barrow skiing and no one would ski. And so me and my cousin picked up skis and we were skiing around town, and people were honking and kind of laughing, and because everyone has cars, snow machines, ATVs, and my nieces were so stoked. I mean, you're opening up whole new doors and windows for these kids. And the more doors and windows that you can open, and healthy habits that you can start at an earlier age, the better off I feel like they'll be. I mean, if they were so fired up about skiing that they wanted to keep skiing after school. And a lot of it has to do with the volunteers too. And the last Barrow trip I did, I believe Robin's daughter was on, and the kids absolutely loved her. And she's one of the best talents in the world. I mean, she's competing at some of the highest levels, and to have that talent brought out to our communities, and these kids light up. I mean, our kids out there, they want to be involved, and they want to be part of a bigger program, or a bigger sporting activity or recreation activity. And so they, even the following week after they had left, I mean, the kids were still wanting to go, and it's kind of the honor system when you're checking out skis. They still wanted to go down some of the new hills they discovered. And like she had mentioned, you're reintroducing them to their community, things that existed there before. They're looking at it in a different way. I think before the skiing programs grew, people were more worried about polar bears and animals and things like that. But I mean, you have activities going on, and before they became popular, people were like, oh, there's like polar bears in elementary school. We were terrified of polar bears. Like, I lived across from the elementary school in Barrow. I was terrified to walk home, and I lived like less than a block away because of just all of the things we would hear about polar bears and the polar bear patrol and things like that. And so so back to the question, which was, I don't even remember what the question was, but I get excited when we get new funding and programs and equipment that's brought out to these communities, because even right now it's so important with the pandemic going on. People are indoors, and it's red zones everywhere across the state. And how are we going to come out of this? I mean, I had to try extra hard. I'm a very social person. I went out and I bought a mountain bike, and I'm thankful to have now that I've been working for 10 years, I'm thankful that I have the capability to go out and buy my own equipment. And a little bit of what Shane, I believe, had touched on was the economics, and Robin kind of touched on that as well, is part of being involved in the outdoor scene is economics. Like, snow machine, I might be able to buy my first snow machine this winter. And when I go back home, I'm using my family's equipment and our whaling cruise gear that it took probably about a decade to get to that point. So if you don't have the family network or the means to purchase equipment, and now I spent quite a bit on a new mountain bike this year, and I've been out, and it's not cheap to get into at all. I would have never been able to do this 10 years ago. And so when it comes to improving access to new outdoor activities, I was very thankful for our region, at least, to have our community foundation doing well, where they were able to do a couple of large grants, and along with Lars and the volunteers within the Ski Coup program and Robin, we were able to go out and deliver new equipment for these communities, whereas before it's so expensive. Like what Shane was talking about, when a family is trying to decide where they're spending their money, in Fairbanks, when we moved there, my parents sacrificed a lot to put us into certain programs. Like we really penny pinched, and I didn't compete. Like, I couldn't compete in gymnastics until I got into middle school when it was free. Like, I wanted to do it my whole life, and then I wasn't able to do it until it was free. And then I had years to catch up on. So in these areas where we're introducing new programs, just to have the ability to partner with with the providers of outdoor equipment and be able to obtain grants and funding to at least remove the barriers of entry to certain activities. I mean, it goes a long way in my mind, at least, because if you're out there and you're trying to decide, well, am I going to spend a few $100s on a new ski setup? And you know, we're out there and everyone has like flashy gear on. Well, to the kids, at least, you know, the kids are skiing in poopy pants and like their outdoors gear. I'm always so thankful when I see people like Luc, Lars, Robin, who are trying to improve access to equipment and outdoor activities, because it opens new worlds for these kids. And so when you're moving between rural and urban areas, it's so important. I feel like it's so important to be able to grasp onto something. Like when you're coming in Anchorage, we have some of the best trails out here. And I've traveled, every time I travel throughout the world, I come back and it opens my eyes even more to the fact that like in South Central and interior, we have great outdoor recreational activities and trails. And to be able to have some type of knowledge in order, or to be able to get into those sports, whether it's hiking, skiing, biking. I feel it's important, and it helps us to reground ourselves in different areas. And was there a question on tourism?
There's so many questions, and it's part of why it's like, I wish, and maybe somebody can think of a way to continue this conversation outside of this space. But I'm going to give you a more direct question this time, Liz. And that's like specifically like, what should someone like me know before? So say I'm going to pack raft to Kaktovik, or say I'm going to bike to Nome, or float down to Sleep, you know, whatever. Like, what do I need to know, and how do I find that? Like, I think this is a missing piece for a lot of visitors.
Well, in when I worked with clients, or even just volunteering time, I've always reached out to multiple groups. I'm not shy. Pick up the phone call. I've done a lot of door knocking, sat down, been invited for dinners, lunches, breakfasts, anywhere in a lot of places that I've landed. But it's just, I cannot stress enough the importance of reaching out ahead of time and multiple times before. Well, I think if it's a solo trip, it's a little different. But also even upon landing, before you do the trip, like if I were to do a solo trip, and I've seen your website, you've done some amazing outdoor stuff that I may never be able to do. I mean, that's why I was nervous to do this talk. But if I were to do a solo trip and I had skills and knowledge to offer to the community, I would call ahead of time and just say, hey, I'd like to give a talk or a presentation on this topic. And I know it may sound a little crazy what I'm about to do because it's out of the ordinary, but I would like to offer a presentation, just like a teaching moment, a lunch and learn. Like when I came back to college, back up to Barrow, they're asking me to at least give talks just to share knowledge. People are curious. And so I feel like there's so many opportunities there to bridge the worlds. And your outdoor world, you have a lot to offer a lot of these different areas, different regions in terms of teaching moments. So first, I can't stress enough just the amount of outreach to be done beforehand. And then also just setting up a date and time to give an hour presentation, like a few hours of this is how, like a how-to demonstration. If there is time and equipment and enough resources to do that. And also just, so outreach is important. I say that's the most important thing before doing these activities and trips. And people appreciate those phone calls. I'll call the city, tribe, the corporation, any of the nonprofits, the subsistence groups. And then if I have a specific question, then I'll, like, if I'm doing like a business development grant or loan program, then I'll ask for references. Is there anyone in the community that has a strong entrepreneurial spirit that wants to start a business, but that you can think of? Because in a lot of these areas, there was no access to loans, no access to the banks. They would never loan in the Wade Hampton area and in some of the low and the economically depressed areas. So it's just picking up the phone, asking for references, or being like, hey, like, I think there's a big interest for skiing in this area, or is there an interest of pack rafting, or I don't know, different materials or kind of like a teaching moment of equipment, things like that. There's so much potential out there, but just picking up the phone and building those connections months before arriving. And those were the best outcomes that I had, whether it came from oil and gas, coal, recreation activities, business development, grants and loans. It's kind of like an over communicating before you get there, but in a respectful way, where you're building those relationships a couple of months before even arriving.
I think that touched on, I'm seeing several comments in the chat that you just answered. So that was really good information. Robin or Shane, did you have anything to add to that? Sort of like, what should a visitor know?
I'll let Shane talk.
Oh, thank you. I would probably have to say that probably connect with the main entities like the tribe, the school, and the city. Let them know who you are. Provide material that could be faxed or emailed, and they could be printed off about your program that you'd like to introduce. That way they can post flyers up at the school, at the post office, at the tribal hall. That way parents know who's coming and what the program is about. And I have to say that that's probably one of the only ways to do it, or that's the way that I would know how to do introducing a new program to a community. That's kind of what I have for right this moment.
Somebody sent me a message. Just well, I'm not sure. You know, we've put ski equipment in 55 villages now, and so it's really nice to know that you get beyond the price issue for skiing and that kind of stuff. Somebody sent me a message saying, well, remind people that, you know, this business costs quite a bit, and it does, but that was why we found supporters, corporate supporters, to help us cover the cost to be able to offer the services we've been doing. And but when it comes to communicating with the villages, I think a little bit about the people who offer that maybe the same trips year after year, landing at the same villages year after year. You know, I think really taking a separate opportunity to come into those places, to meet with the communities, to talk about what you're doing. You know, I just keep thinking there should be a place somebody could go to. My dream is to have a little museum in Guyana and to get the kids involved and have a place where visitors could sit down for a few minutes and have a cup of coffee, and the people who have been trained could talk about their community and its history. And we're kind of missing some of that in except for a few villages. Anaktuvuk has a wonderful museum. Maybe there's a few other places that also do, but to me, that's just such a great teaching opportunity locally, but also the sharing part is really an important you know, way for people to learn communication skills and that sort of thing. So that's a kind of thing I think is our responsibility on a village level, to find a way for our community to be more welcoming, but there's lots of reasons to do it, not just, I mean, we really don't get very many visitors in a place like Guyana, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. But I would love that sort of thing to happen, and unfortunately it often doesn't, because they're just not thinking about it. But if you went ahead of time and met with the city council and met with the traditional people and got some pointers, I think a lot more could happen that the community would really feel like somehow they were benefiting too.
Thank you, Robin. I think, Irving, you're not here, are you? Shoot. Oh, sorry that we didn't get to hear from Irving. We've just got a couple minutes here before the end of the hour, and I would just, I guess, like to open it up to the panel. You know, we've got, what, 60 people here now, and I think 100 signed up with interest. So advice you can give the participants here, and it is mostly a mix of native and non-native people that are interested in playing outside without maybe being able to justify why they like it. So advice on how, there's a comment here from a nurse here in Anchorage, like, how can I help natives that I'm interacting with at the hospital, like, feel comfortable going to Flat Top or going to Goose Lake or whatever. And likewise for people coming to the villages. Any advice for this audience?
Can you say that hospital one again?
Yeah, it sounds like my mic wasn't working. There was a comment. Overall, I'm just wondering, like, what advice do you have to offer to the participants here? You know, there are 60 people following the conversation that are interested in making outdoor recreation more accessible, both to natives in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and also in the villages. So kind of big picture advice.
Well, you know, here in Anchorage, we've got such amazing programs, and perhaps, you know, they need to make, you know, we've got Junior Nordic, you know, what kid shouldn't be doing Junior Nordic? It's just an amazing thing that's created opportunities for so many people. We're just a standout place in the world because of that. But that was why, when knowing that kids in my village weren't getting the opportunity, I mean, that was the whole reason behind creating the Ski Coup opportunity. But there's many connections to Native corporations because they're part of the big support base for Ski Coup type program. But when it comes to the hospitals, you've got really cool, you know, if you're a skier, you know, to be able to go over to the school and say, I'd like to take a few kids out skiing with me in the afternoon, or, you know, or something like that. The best thing is for that equipment to get used as much as possible throughout the whole winter, not just us showing up for 5 days. You know, we have many opportunities to lengthen the season. We just need more people on the ground. And I think when people move to a place like that, working with the kids is a great way to create a relationship in the community that you just don't get when you're just going to your compound and your place, you know, the special place that hospital people live. You know, it takes an effort to get out into the community and really meet people, and doing it through the kids is a really good way to do that.
Well, if I can add to that, I just probably start planning now if you want to introduce something for next year or the year after. It sure takes a long time to kind of get things done, and everyone's on a different time schedule. I mean, if you have a particular interest or a program you like to introduce, maybe if you need some assistance with maybe financial resources, maybe you can talk to the regional Native corporation. When it comes down to implementing it, maybe the logistics with the tribal entity locally. But also remember, you're going into a remote part of the state, and that there's no hotels, flights are often delayed. You'll be sleeping on the floor in the school, the tribal hall. Food's gonna be probably 3 times what you pay for at home. It's not an easy endeavor, but once it's executed, and you could really see the payoff almost immediately on day one, and then hopefully you stay for a week. That's what I was, you know, told that's appropriate amount of time, 5 days, to really let people know about your program and, you know, build that relationship, and maybe come back the next year and see how everyone's doing.
Liz, any closing thoughts? And I'll just mention I added a Google Doc to the chat where people could enter emails if they want to continue this conversation somehow.
You know what, since we didn't get Irving on, let me talk about White Mountain. White Mountain is this amazing place, and we produced a little film about it. It's called Making Tracks. And what it's about is this 45 years of skiing in this village. A man by the name of John Miles showed up there with a bundle of skis and got everybody in all the villages in that region. He calls it, he brainwashed somebody in every village to be the ski coach. And pretty soon all the villages had skiing as their main sport. And they produced people like Jim Oksaktoruk, who became a national champion in skiing, and Paul Lincoln, who became a national champion biathlete, who had a whole career with the National Guard because he was a biathlete. And in White Mountain, there's this amazing trail called the Sweetheart Loop, and it's not an easy trail. It goes all the way through the trees, and then you end up above the tree line and then go back into the trees. It's just the most beautiful trail that the whole village respects, and they make sure it stays nice because then the kids can use it. And every year there's a competition that happens in that region, and it's Irving who runs it. And that's the amazing thing to me, having been to so many places where, you know, our teachers are quite transient, and the idea that this program that came in through the teachers, but ultimately was taken over by local people like Irving. I mean, it's just such a really cool.
Anyway, online, you should be able to select something that says view goals.
So
Did you see that?
I was hoping everybody would have a chance to meet Irving because he was the star of our show, in our Making Tracks movie. If anybody's interested, it's available at the Skiku website online. It's something you can buy. It's a 35-minute film. But I love the story of White Mountain. And of course, that's a place that welcomes the Iditarod. You know, so there are many places that do know how to welcome people as they come through their villages. And you know, those villages that are along the Iditarod are really good examples.
I think we're out of time here, and I want to honor that. Everybody's busy schedules. Liz, did you want to add anything?
I don't really have any closing comments. I think I talked enough. Thank you, Luke. Thanks for hosting, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Awesome topic.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, and as far as where to go from here, I would love to hear from, I see Mallory Conger's on here, and I know you've done some really cool trips. I'm pretty jealous of some of what you've seen. Oh, and now we have Irving just in time to say goodbye. So yeah, I'll figure out a way to kind of collect an email list and continue this conversation. Lee, you probably want to close this out.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, and thanks to Robin and Liz and Shane. I found that really inspiring to hear you all, and got my brain working about ways I can better interact with villages and consider ways we can just do more of that. But I want to invite all people on the call to next week for the online version of the 5th Annual Confluence Summit on the Outdoor Economy. Our guests next week include Lisa Murkowski and former Governor Tony Knowles, and a great guy from Heidelberg, Damon Bell-Holter, who's a former pro basketball player, who's is cycling with a cause for raising awareness of mental health issues for Black and Indigenous men. Anyway, they should be great sessions. And our tourism roundtable will feature a regenerative tourism catalyst, Mary Goddard. She's with Southeast Sustainable Partnership. And then also Sitka Tribe of Alaska, the Economic Development Director, Camille Ferguson. And so we're going to be talking about these new dimensions in tourism, and hopefully we provide time for audience feedback in those discussions. And then on the last day, on the 29th, we have New Mexico Representative Angelica Rubio and Alaska Rep. Garen Tarr, who are going to be introducing the concept of an outdoor equity fund, which is an idea pioneered in New Mexico But what they did was created, the state legislature created a fund to get money to programs that serve underserved kids, to get them into outdoor programs that build skills and confidence and plant the seed for future careers. But you can get all those details and info at alaskaoutdooralliance.org. Hope to see some of you next week. And we will have these lunch and learns every Wednesday for the foreseeable future, at least till the holidays kind of kick in. And I welcome Luc to put together another session. No pressure. But anyway, thank you so much to everyone, and we'll see you next time. Get outside, go vote.
Thank you. Sure will.